and final session of the webinar series on the new MUTCD. This is Victoria Beal with the Ohio LTAP Center. I'm very pleased to have colleagues with me who are going to be presenting to you today. I'm just going to do a couple of quick housekeeping items, and then I'll be turning it over to Kevin, who's going to be your main presenter. First off, we do have a copy of the slides for you in the handout section of the GoToWebinar panel. If you are not able to download it from there, don't worry. We will email a copy out to you later on. But if you can download it and you'd like to have it now, it's there for you. Also, questions should be placed into the question box in the GoToWebinar panel. And we do have additional subject matter experts who are going to be available and be working on answering those throughout the webinar. So, and last but not least, we are attempting to record this webinar. If it's successful, you'll get a link to that recording. If it's not successful, it's a good thing you're here, so you can hear it live. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to Kevin. Are you ready, Kevin?
Yep, I'm ready to go.
Thanks.
All right, well, thanks, Victoria, and thanks everybody for jumping on today for our final MUTCD session here through the LTAP folks. I definitely appreciate everyone that's been able to jump onto any of these, and hopefully you've got a little bit of information out of these that that you can take away and use in your daily tasks. So before we get going here, just again, kind of want to reiterate a couple things. I guess first off, just I'll introduce myself or reintroduce myself. Kevin Fiant with the Office of Roadway Engineering, been with ODOT for 25 plus years now. Most of that spent at our District 6 office, doing a variety of things, project management to design to plan review, etc. Then the last 4+ years here, I've been at our central office working in the traffic control section and specifically the traffic standards. So just working on the upkeep and maintenance of all of those standards. So it's a little bit about myself, and just as a something to help you with my last name, the way I describe it to everybody is it's like giant, but with an F instead of the G. And since I'm a little, I'm tall, that seems to work pretty well for folks. So just wanted to give you a little bit of background there. Moving on here. So again, we'll talk a little bit of housekeeping. Victoria's already touched on some of this, but again, if you can, if you do have a question as we're going through the session, if you're able to, put in your question, what slide number or maybe section of the MUTCD it's related to, that helps our folks that are monitoring questions to kind of be able to pull that stuff up and research if needed to respond to your question. So that just helps us out if you're able to do that. As we're going, we will be responding to as many questions as we can just through the chat or question box as the session is progressing. So, if you ask a question, our intent is to answer most of those as we go through the session. If we do get to the end there and there are still some open questions, or you have some that come up maybe towards the end, we will take some time at the end of the session as well to try to talk through any questions. And if there's any that we cannot answer, today, we will let you know that and then do some research and get back with folks. Also, just want to make note that this session, we will be having one break, approximately midway through the session. So just wanted to make everybody aware of that as well. As far as for today's agenda, so, for those of you that have sat in on some of the previous sessions, the first bullet point here is probably going to be a little bit of a review, but hopefully I'll try to sprinkle in maybe a couple little new tidbits there to help everybody out. But, I want to make sure that if there are any new folks, that this is maybe the first session that they at least get a little bit of the overview of the, how we've set up the OMUTCD now as a combined document using the Ohio Supplement and the National MUTCD. The big portion of today's session is going to be focusing on Part 7 and Part 9 of the manual. So that's our school traffic zones, and then also Part 9 is traffic control for bicycles. So that's the focus area, but we will touch on some of the basic info when we kick off here. Some of the goals for today, again, just want to kind of keep reiterating and showing folks that maybe haven't been exposed yet, or just don't use the OMUTCD a lot, just how to get around with the new manual, and the combination of the two documents. We definitely want to highlight some of the Ohio specific information, kind of give you some background on why we did make some Ohio specific changes, and also kind of call attention to some of the changes just between the new manual and our previous manual. And then, like I said earlier, the main portion here of today's session is going to be focusing on Parts 7 and 9, and not going to be able to hit everything, but trying to get you enough info so that if you are working on a project or a task and you need to get into those sections, you have a pretty good idea of where to go looking for that information. Some things that we're not going to be able to do with today's session. I mean, we're definitely not going to be able to hit on every last change with Part 7 or Part 9. I mean, there were quite a lot of changes with the national manual the last time it was published, or at least the original version was back in 2009. So a lot has changed since that time, and they did make quite a few updates in this new version. So we're definitely not going to be able to hit on all of them. We're trying to, we will try to touch on some that we definitely feel like are pretty big ticket items, but I wanted to call attention to these couple of hyperlinks here. These will take you to the federal site, the FHWA site for the MUTCD, and there is some information out there where you can get a redline version showing the changes between the 2009 and this new national MUTCD. And then there's also a document that lists out disposition comments. So, during the development, a lot of comments were submitted, and this document kind of goes through a lot of the pertinent comments and provides responses on, how those were being addressed. So, the other thing just to note, these couple of links here, they're specific to the national manual. Our 2012 OMUTCD, we had we had a standalone document, so there were, it's not going to show you every change from our OMUTCD. So I just kind of want to make that clear to folks. Um, with this release, we have transitioned to a new model where we are going with the MUTCD plus the Ohio supplement. Previously, we had a singular document that was Ohio specific. Just as we got into this process, we had one of three options. We could adopt the national manual exactly as is. We could develop an Ohio standalone manual, or we could develop an Ohio supplement. And after kind of going through those different options and talking to some other states, looking at some other states examples, we opted to go with this Ohio supplement model for multiple reasons. And if you are interested in some more, a deeper dive on that, the part one, the first session of these LTAP sessions kind of gets into that in a little bit more detail. But again, just our current version now consists of two documents, the national MUTCD and the Ohio supplement. So, and again, there is a link to that, and we will take a little deeper dive in that here in just a few minutes. Here's just, this slide's just showing the transition, so here's the cover page of the previous 2012 OMUTCD, and now with our transition to 2 documents, here's the cover pages for the 2 new documents. Here in the middle is the national MUTCD, and then on the right-hand side here is our Ohio supplement document. So both of those together are our new OMUTCD. Definitely want to also point out that since we've changed to this new model, users need to be aware of revisions to the national manual. So back in March, there was a release of revision 1 to the national manual. It was officially released on March 5th. So make sure that, as you're using these 2 documents combined, just make sure that you are referring to that revision 1. There's a full list of all the changes made on the federal site, and we just want to make sure that you're using the most current information. And then our Ohio supplement document, we will be pushing out some updates to incorporate the revisions. That'll be coming out in our July release. Most of the changes, it's basically, we are going to be able to actually eliminate a few of our Ohio specific sections, just because some of the changes actually just incorporated some of the things we had in our Ohio supplement. And there are a couple other various miscellaneous changes as well. So again, this is a review, but here is a breakdown of the different parts of the MUTCD, parts 1 through 5. And this slide, kind of gives you, so if you haven't attended the different sessions, the different LTAP sessions, and there's a particular part of the manual you have some interest in, this would show you where you can, where you could sign up for. I believe these are all going to be reran in sometime here in the summer. So if you're interested in any of these parts, you could definitely check that out and sign up for the rerun of this webinar series. The other thing here with part 5, just again to reiterate, part 5 is completely new content. They did away with the traffic control for low volume roads section. And what they did with that content is they kind of moved that around to all of the different applicable parts. So if it's sign related, the low volume information has been moved over to part 2, etc. Moving on here, so parts 6 through 9. Today we're going to be talking about 7 and 9. So again, our traffic control for school areas, and then our traffic control for bicycle facilities. That's going to be our primary focus for today's session. Just again, a refresher how to use the 2 documents together. So number 1, you want to determine which part and which section of the MUTCD that you're interested in. Number 2, once you know what section, what part and section you're interested in, go to the Ohio supplement, take a look at the table of contents. If that part and section is listed in the table of contents of the Ohio supplement, then you're just going to use the Ohio supplement content. If it is not, then you're going to use the national MUTCD content. We purposely, even if we just had 1 or 2 small changes to an entire section, we purposely pulled over the entire section into the Ohio supplement, just so that users wouldn't have to kind of be bouncing back and forth between sections. So here I'm gonna jump to the live web page and show you guys a few things. Hopefully, maybe 1 or 2 new things that I haven't talked previously about. But down here at the bottom, I did want to emphasize this and make sure everybody's aware. So the intent, in a lot of our documentation within ODOT certainly, and probably in other agencies as well, it talks about the OMUTCD. what we want to make sure that everybody realizes is that, now that we've transitioned to this new model of 2 documents, those 2 documents make up the OMUTCD, and you can kind of, you can read that highlighted yellow section, but the basis is that we want to make sure everybody understands that these 2 documents are now our OMUTCD. So just, from a contractual standpoint or anything like that, we want to make sure that folks understand that. And I'm going to jump over to our webpage a little bit here and show off a couple things. Oh, maybe I won't. Let's see. Looks like I just got an error message, so that's helpful. Okay, here we go. All right. Can everybody see I just pulled over the web page.
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. So, again, I'm not going to take too much time. I mean, we've got the basic kind of overview information here, kind of laying out the regulatory aspects and the references back to the ORC and so forth. That's here in this top part. We've got links to both documents down at the bottom. I also did add some information about that revision 1 of the National Manual with a link to where folks can go to find out more information about the specifics there. And then again, just kind of a section here just to explain, how to go about using the 2 documents. And then we did also add in the right column here the same 2 links. So, if you happen to be looking at this on a mobile device, this might be slightly different. It would be formatted differently. So we wanted to make sure that there was access both in the main content and on the sidebar content, just so that, as things get reformatted, you'll have access to those links. One other thing just to make a note of too, as these recordings have been released by our LTAP partners, we've been adding a link to those YouTube videos. So we're up, through session 4, and like Victoria says, as long as this one is successfully recorded, this one will also be getting posted out on the LTAP YouTube page. And then once that happens, we'll be updating this link so you can go back and review that at a later date. And I guess the thing to be aware of though, with these links, these are just YouTube videos. I mean, you're welcome to look them over for reference purposes, but if you're interested in professional development hour credit, you would need to sign up for the actual webinars, like when they do the replay of the webinars. So just be aware of that. Real quick here, I want to open up. Here's our Ohio supplement document. Again, so this is just a PDF. So depending on what browser you're using and the PDF reader that you have installed with your browser may look slightly different, but we do have bookmarks to all of the different sections. You can just, expand the bookmarks out here. And if you want to jump to a particular section, you can jump right to that section. Also, pretty much in all of the different PDF readers, if you hit Control F, that pulls up a search box. And we did go through and make sure that all of the graphics that are pulled into the Ohio supplement are searchable. We ran them through some ORC technology, and it did a pretty good job of pulling in some of the text from the different graphics so that that text is also searchable. So if you're looking for a particular topic, let's see, let me go back up to the top, and I'll just. Yeah, so like here's an example of a graphic where uh, the figure title includes pedestrian. If you do this with the national manual, unfortunately, some of these graphics, the text in them is not searchable. We've had some conversations about that, and we're hoping that's something that can be pushed out with an update in the future. So just a couple things to be aware of as you're looking for content in the Ohio Supplement, the bookmarking and uh, the search functionality as well. With the national document, I'll pull it up here. So this link is set up just to take you to the main homepage, FHWA's homepage for the MUTCD. We did this purposely just so that as they were to release additional revisions, you'd always be seeing that, here. And then you can also use the side menu here to navigate around as well. But we'll jump in here to revision 1. And I'm going to pull up that actual document. Right now, they do not have it broken down by the different parts. It's just a single multi-page PDF of the whole entire document. So it is a pretty good size file. And you see here, it's taken a bit of time to get that downloaded onto my machine. Thought I already had it and would have been cached, but I guess that's not the case. So we'll let that load up here because there's a couple things I just want to call attention to. And I haven't mentioned this in the previous sessions, just that are some nice features with the national MUTCD document. Give that a chance to load here. Okay, great. So now, again, same thing here. I'm gonna make this a little bigger so you all can see it. But again, this manual, it's bookmarked as well, so you can jump to different sections. I'm going to jump to part 7 since that's one of the ones we're going to be talking about today. One thing I wanted to point out, so within the entire national manual, as you're looking at the document, and if you hover over references to different sections, you'll notice that the cursor changes there. So these are actually set up to where there's a hot link. I'm not sure of the terminology. I think changes a little bit depending on the PDF programs that you use, but this will take you. So if you click this just jumps you right to that particular section that's being referenced. So you can jump there real quick to look into that particular section. So that's kind of handy to be able to navigate around. Kind of similarly in the tables also, say for the signs here, this lists out the different signs. I'll make that a little bigger for y'all. So, list out the different signs, what the sign designation is, and then what section. And then as you notice here, when you hover over that section reference, it changes over and you can click on that and it's going to jump you right to that particular section. So a couple of nice little features with the national manual. But like I said, the national manual, the graphics, some of the graphics don't, if you do a search for text, you won't get hits in some of the graphics. So that's just something to be aware of. So we will jump back into our slide deck here and want to take a moment again just to talk about, this is coming back from a review of part 1, but this is pretty important content here. And this is coming from the FHWA facts page, the MUTCD frequently asked questions. And the question here is, if there is no compliance date for one of the new requirements, when do devices in the field have to be upgraded to meet the requirements? And I'm not going to read this whole thing, but I just highlighted the the most pertinent information. I definitely would encourage you to read all of this, and there's actually quite a few other questions that they've provided answers to as well. But the short story is that the vast majority of the traffic control devices, there's no requirement for updating those. The as far as the only requirement is that they have to be updated as you're doing new improvements or at the end of the service life. So in other words, you don't have to, if there's happens to be something that's out in the field that's not one of the target compliance states, which we'll look at here in just a moment. um, if it's as long as it's not a target compliance state, those devices can, you don't have to immediately replace those. You just have to be starting to plan for the replacement of those and then do them either at the end of life cycle, as through your routine maintenance, or with a project that's happening through that particular area, that type of thing. So I just want to make sure that folks are aware of that. Um, Transitioning here, so this slide is showing, so there are, it's a handful of traffic control devices in the new manual that have very specific compliance dates. So those compliance dates here on the right side of the slide here, this right column, and then the sections and what the topic is. It's nothing that we're talking about today has any um, target compliance states established, but I think it's important for those folks that are involved, just in general with the upkeep of traffic control devices, to be aware of these and the timeframes associated. And then just, the most of them are out, 5 years from the initial release date, with the exceptions being this maintaining the minimum retroreflectivity. This is for pavement markings. So this one had been released as part of the previous MUTCD, and it is just kind of carried through with this target date. So this one should not be new news for anybody, but this one is rapidly approaching, so definitely be aware of that. And then this one about the assessment of your rail grade crossings near traffic signals, since that's there's a good bit of analysis work associated with that. That time frame is a little bit longer. It was 10 years out from the release, but otherwise all the others are 5 years from the effective date of the national manual. And then the final little bit of review, which, again, I can't stress this enough, just the importance to understand that, the whole entire manual is set up with use of the term standard, guidance, option, and support. And so what this slide is showing here is just on the left-hand side here is the current version, the 11th edition version of the definitions for those terms. On the right hand side, this shows the markups of the previous version, so what has changed. Just a couple things to call attention to. Number one, here up with standards, they did add some language here about deviation of a standard. It's definitely not something that is recommended. However, if there is a valid engineering reason for it, and there is a documented engineering study associated with it, validating that change or deviation, that has been added. And then with the guidance definition, this is a little bit subtle, but they did remove the but not mandatory language here. So basically it's just straight up saying that guidance statements need to be followed unless there is engineering judgment or engineering study that indicates a deviation is appropriate. So So just a couple things to be aware of as far as changes, and definitely get familiar with this terminology. I mean, it's the same for the most part. It's the same as previous, how the manual was set up, but like I say, there are some slight changes with the definitions. So just be aware of that. For more info, again, just another quick plug for the session 1 of the LTAP MUTCD trainings. Again, maybe Victoria can talk about this at the end. As far as I think those have been scheduled now for the summer. But if you did miss session 1, want to know some more about the background information, more about the nuts and bolts of combining the two documents, and then a deeper dive into part 1, that's where we get, that's what you'll find with session 1. So before we jump into some of the details for parts 7 and 9, just want to mention again, with this new release of the manual, there's been a ton of information that has been reorganized. And for the most part, we've in spending a lot of time going through this manual, it does, I do feel like they've done a good job of reorganizing information into chunks so that it makes good logical sense. I think they've, before there was maybe a little bit more having to kind of bounce around between sections to get the information you're looking for. There still is certainly some of that just because of the amount of information here, but I think overall they have done a pretty nice job of getting things reorganized. And just be aware that so if you were really familiar with the previous manual and you knew exactly where to look for a particular piece of content, it is possible that that content might have been relocated. So jumping into part 7, just to start off here, I want to show how part 7 is organized. It's set up with four different chapters. We're going to take a little closer look at all 4 of these and talk through any of the Ohio specific content, and then also some other a few other things that just want to make sure that folks are aware of, some important changes maybe that weren't Ohio specific content. So we'll take a deeper dive. First off, looking at chapter 7A, and so each of the chapters broken up into multiple sections. As we get into this, the slides, any of the sections that have Ohio supplement content, I just highlighted this as we get into each chapter. So they'll have yellow. Pink is just a slide that's being provided just to make sure we hit on this content, but it's not Ohio specific content. So we'll take a look at 7A02 in chapter 7A. And this section has to do with school route planning, school route plans. It talks about some of the information that folks need to be looking at if you're looking at an overall plan for how school kids can get to the different school facilities, whether it's walking or biking. The thing I want to emphasize here is that ODOT does have a program. It's called Safe Routes to School. And if you're a local entity that works with the different school districts, and if you're not aware of this, it's definitely something I would definitely encourage you to check out. This QR code will get you to that the homepage for the ODOT Safe Routes to School program. But the thing to emphasize here is ODOT's program does require that to be eligible for potential funding, the entities need to have a school travel plan, is what ODOT calls it, but it's essentially these school route plans that are talked about in the MUTCD. So just be aware of that. Check out this section in the MUTCD, and then also if you are interested in potentially looking into some funding sources for projects, check out that Safe Routes to School program within ODOT. Moving on into Chapter 7B, which gets into signs for our school zones. Got a handful of sections here that we're going to take a little closer look at with some slides. Two of the sections are in the Ohio Supplement, 7B03 and 7B05. And like I say, we will we'll take a little closer look at those two sections plus the others here highlighted yellow as well. So with section 7B01, wanted to pull this one in and provide a slide just to kind of re-emphasize pretty much all of the sections of the MUTCD that include different signs have tables at the beginning of the section, of the chapters, of the sections that lists out the different signs that are covered in that particular section. And then it also provides, like I say, the section reference, so you know where to go to look for more information about those particular signs, plus the the size requirements depending on your roadway that these signs are going to be installed. So it's a really good resource, reference resource, just to get started with as you're trying to determine the appropriate signing for a particular site. The other thing to mention here with these tables, so one thing as we work through the Ohio Supplement development, we kind of talked about whether or not we should be incorporating these tables over into the Ohio Supplement. If we did have Ohio specific signs, what we elected to do was we elected not to do that. What we ended up doing was showing the Ohio specific signs in the applicable figures. So, you know, graphic of some of the sign of the Ohio specific signs. So I just want to make sure that you're aware that these tables are not going to list out any of the Ohio specific signs necessarily, and that where you can find all the information associated with the Ohio specific signs, you would need to go over to our ODOT SDMM manual. So taking a look at section 7B02, so this covers your school area signs and plaques. And reason I put this slide in here, I just wanted to kind of call attention to, this in paragraph 2, it talks about, the different locations for some of these signs, and it brings up the term school area and school zone. And with regard to school zone, school zone is a very specific definition. The definition is in part 1 of the manual. Also, the definition is in our Ohio Revised Code. So it's, there's a very specific legal definition for school zone. So I want to make sure everybody's aware of that and refers back to part 1 of the OMUTCD. And then also in part 1, it refers to the ORC section where that definition is found. School area is a little bit is not as defined. I mean, it definitely, it's school zone is much more specific. School area is a little less specific, but again, it has some definitions associated with it. So just kind of wanted to point out the nuance there. And to find more info, check out part 1 of the manual, specifically the definitions section. So this page here, so this is a figure that is in the Ohio Supplement. It actually precedes the section, the text section that covers this information. So I just wanted to pull this figure in here and talk a little bit about it. So it's figure 7B01, and the reason it's in the Ohio Supplement, and if for folks that were part of session 2 of these training sessions where we got into part 2 and part 3. We talked about how Ohio is a yield state as far as pedestrian interaction. Um, some states are stops, some states are yield. Ohio happens to be a yield state. So we just wanted to make sure that our Ohio users were aware that if they are planning to use these signs, they need to be using the yield version of the signs. I mean, obviously, with pedestrians, if there are pedestrians in an active crosswalk, the motorists are required to yield, to stop, for those pedestrians. So um, it's just it's just basically how the national manual is set up so that it allowed the flexibility, knowing that some states had legislation one way or the other. So we just went ahead just to make sure that we didn't end up with some stray versions of these signs that called out stop, maybe folks that weren't aware of the ORC requirements. We just wanted to make sure that that was clear, and that's why that is part of the Ohio supplement. Next slide here. So this is just some additional information associated with figures 7B01. And this particular slide, this is one that I actually just added into the slide deck here this morning. So it is not, for those of you that downloaded the slides provided in the GoToMeeting, this one's not in there, but this is one that I couldn't believe when I went back and reviewed things this morning that I had missed this, but it's a pretty important thing I wanted to make sure that folks are aware of when it comes to school speed limit signs. So what ended up happening here? So on the left side of the slide is the previous OMUTCD, and so what ended up happening? We did away with the Ohio specific signage that talks about the during restricted hours. So both the plaque and the sign itself. So what we have now is here in the middle in the new OMUTCD. Again, this is in figure 7B1. So instead, we did away with during restricted hours, and now there's these different options here in the OMUTCD. And then for Ohio specific projects, we have now developed a standard construction drawing, and what we are recommending, what we show in our standard construction drawing. So, so for ODOT let type projects that were to be including school speed limit assemblies, this would be, typically what would be used. So we have the school warning plaque up at the top with your speed limit sign, and then we're using the when children are present plaque below that. A little bit of the background here. So, it's a pretty long story, but I'll kind of try to summarize it. But throughout this process of reviewing the new manual and preparing the Ohio supplement, we were given guidance from our FHWA partners to look into ways that we could reduce the number of Ohio specific signs, and particularly in cases where there were federal signs that could meet the same need. So we got into this section, and through some feedback with our FHWA partners, they, gave us some recommendations to look into these signs, and we worked with our chief legal office, kind of working through to make sure that our legal team was comfortable with these changes as well. And this is what we ended up with, essentially just doing away with those Ohio specific signs. Again, this is a good example and a reminder to you all that so if you have a project that's replacing a school speed limit sign assembly, be aware, make sure you're not just replacing in kind, that you're taking a look at the new MUTCD information and getting the new sign assembly out there. So this is a pretty important one for those folks that get involved with placement of these school speed limit signs. So just want to make everyone aware of this. And again, like we talked about earlier, the existing assemblies, if they're in good condition and operating, they don't have to be immediately removed. They just, when you go, when the service life is done or there's a project going through that particular location, that's the time to be upgrading, updating these signs to meet the new manual requirements. So moving on into section 7B03. So this section, the text section, is in the Ohio supplement, and essentially what this does, it's making all of the text changes to those signs that we were just looking at, the stop versus yield signs. So it's essentially just striking out all of the sign references to those stop versions of the signs. And then we, call attention to that and kind of give a little bit of the background information as far as, the yielding versus stopping to pedestrians, and how the ORC is currently written. 7B05. So this also is in the Ohio supplement, and the bottom of this slide, it just shows, this is the paragraph that actually has the Ohio specific changes. The reasoning here is that this section lists out the distances, and when we reviewed this in comparison to our ORC, there was a deviation there. We wanted to make sure that we incorporated the Ohio specific ORC requirements as far as the distances as for these signs and plaques. So the section 7B06, this isn't in the Ohio supplement, but it's just one I wanted to pull in and talk a little bit about. This gets into the details. If there was a school zone that did have some legal authority to increase fines, this would be the setup, and the language here on the left gets into how you would go about setting that signage up. I guess the thing just I want to mention here as well is there is a House bill that's in process now, that's looking into potentially increasing fines, but it's not through the legislative process. So there is no statewide requirement currently. If you're a local and there are issues in a particular zone, and there's certainly, a local could certainly enact some legislation to increase fines, and then this section could be applicable to you. But again, you would need to have that legislation in place before getting these signs out there. Transitioning on to markings. So going to take a quick look at our crosswalk markings. And with this slide, really, I just wanted I pulled this in here. This just shows the differences between the original release of the MUTCD and the revision 1 release. So, throughout the new revision 1 release of the national manual, any of the changes have the little side bar mark to show where the changes happen. This happens to be the markup version, just to kind of show you all, what did change in this particular section. It's, it was mostly just some clarifying updates, but if you do want to take a deeper dive, again, the resources are out there to take a look at the full marked up versions of the original 2024 version of the National MUTCD, and then this revision 1 version. And moving on here, just talk quickly about crossing supervision. And so these two sections, 7001 and O2, get into that, the information associated with adult crossing guards, and then how how that the crossing guards should be controlling traffic and the equipment and so forth that they need. The thing to stress here, in certain situations, these crossing guards can be really valuable tools in the toolbox to help in areas where you've got a lot of pedestrian school children, getting to the different school facilities. The thing to stress here, and it talks about it in these sections, is make sure that your crossing guards are visible, that they've got the appropriate reflective safety apparel on. Also make sure that they are using the paddles. In this case, kind of different than than a flagging operation. The paddles associated here are just stop on both sides. And the idea here, again, a little bit different than your traditional traffic control, say with a law officer. The idea here is for these crossing guards to kind of be monitoring traffic, and when there are appropriate gaps, that's the time to get out there and to stop, to allow the school children to cross. So just kind of wanted to call attention to some of the information in these two sections, and especially if you happen to work with a school that that has a lot of pedestrian traffic and high motor vehicle traffic areas. This is a tool in the toolbox to definitely consider, and here's some of the associated info with it. And with that, we come to our first break here. So we are, where are we? We are at it's 1:52. So how about we'll just start back up at 2 o'clock. And so give everybody around 8 minutes or so, and we'll start back up here shortly.
Sounds great. If anybody has questions while they're on break, feel free to put them in the question box, and I'll continue assigning those to our subject matter experts who are helping Kevin with those during the presentation. Thanks.
All right. All right. Okay, I got 2 o'clock here on my end. Victoria, can you hear me okay?
Sure can.
All right, great. We'll get going here in the final stretch and get into some discussion about bicycle traffic controls. All right. All right, so now we will be transitioning into part 9. And again, this is our traffic control for bicycle facilities. It's organized, set up 6 different chapters. You can see here on the slide. A couple things to note here. I mean, there is a lot of new information in this part of the manual. There are several things that used to be interim approval items with the previous manual that have now been fully incorporated into the new manual. There have been some changes with some of the signage. We're going to hit on several of those things, but not every last new piece of information. So just be aware that there is a lot of new info here. And then the other thing, just and this pretty much goes for the whole entire OMU TCD, but just to kind of stress it again, the OMU TCD is intended and focused in the areas of traffic control devices. It's not intended to be a design bike facility design guide. Uh, as far as for geometrics and things like that, you would need to go to other resources for bike designs, be it the ODOT MDG, the AASHTO bike guide, other resources. So, and that, I mean, that pretty much applies to the whole entire MUTCD, but just kind of want to re-emphasize that here as we kind of wrap up these training sessions. So jumping into chapter 9A, so this just gets into the general information, talking about the signing, marking, etc. We are going to take a little closer look at 9A02. This slide, this table covers the signs associated, and a lot of the signs obviously, can be used for other purposes as well. But this table again, just as with pretty much all the sections that have signage referenced, there is a table at the beginning that lists out the different signs, where to find more information, and the sizes associated. So again, a great reference, great starting point if you're looking to, need to find information on a particular sign. Just a great resource. And then this figure here, just a good handy reference for placement of signs as far as vertical and or horizontal clearances when you're talking about a shared use type path facility. Moving into the chapter 9B, this gets into the regulatory signs associated with bicycles and bike facilities. So we're going to take a look at a handful of sections here, and then we do have one section that is part of the Ohio supplement. We'll also be taking a look at that one. That's the bicycle use shoulder only sign section, and we'll take a little closer look at that here in just a moment. But first off, section 9B02, it's not in the Ohio supplement, but wanted to pull this one up and make folks aware, of this plaque that's out there available in cases where the different instructions, signage, there's an exception for bicycle use. So you can kind of see here on the figure on the right-hand side of this slide, you got a case where you've got, two-way motor vehicle traffic and a shared bike, shared use bike facility. approaching this intersection, the motor vehicle traffic has to either go left or right, but the bike traffic, there is a bike facility that continues on through that intersection. So that's a use case for where you might use that accept bicycles sign. And then the other thing to mention here, and I highlighted it, is the accept bicycles plaque is not to be used to to provide an exception to a stop or a yield sign. That is not a permissible use. So something to be aware of there. 9B 08, this gets into the selective exclusion signs. We talked a lot about this during session 2 of these LTAP, this LTAP series, which is the part 2, gets into the part 2 section. But again, it's the emphasis here is just if there is prohibitions, in order for those things to be enforceable, those things need to have legislation or ordinances in place. So in other words, you can't just go out there and place some of these signs, and you have to have that accompanying legislation to be able to effectively enforce those. So this section here, this one is in the Ohio Supplement, and the reason is pretty simple. In Ohio, we don't allow bicycle use on freeways. This particular section does talk about, freeway and expressway. So what we did, we just went in and we struck out the mentions of freeway use, and then just added the support information reference back to the ORC that prohibits that use. And then, similarly, the figure that is part of that section, we just made the same change as well. And again, that's 9B 16. So section 9B 18. So this gets into two-stage bicycle turn box signing. And again, this is the regulatory signing associated. There's some other signage we'll look at a little bit later. Plus, we'll talk about some of the associated markings with these traffic control devices. But this is a completely new section of the MUTCD or the OMUTCD. Two-stage bike boxes were part of, were an interim approval item with the previous manual, but now have been incorporated, directly into the MUTCD. So, and then this, the highlighted section here just talks about some of the use cases where a bicycle turn box might be necessary. But this is not, an all-inclusive list. There could be other use cases where there might be a need. So just wanted to take a quick look at that, and then also emphasize, when you are using two-stage bicycle turn boxes, it's important to make sure that you're addressing the motor vehicle traffic and prohibiting right turns on red or turns on red. So you need to make sure that you get that regulatory signing out there to prohibit those movements, just so that you don't have conflicts with the potential bicyclist being in here and say somebody on this side street here wanting to make a right turn on red. That definitely something to make sure that you're paying attention to. And there are some examples of these in use out in the field where the regulatory signs aren't out there. So just something to kind of be thinking about, if your agency has some of these two-stage bike boxes out on your streets. So moving into chapter 9C, this gets into the warning signs. The one section that we'll take a little closer look at is the accept bicycles. So there's a regulatory plaque, and there's also a warning plaque for accept bicycles. So I wanted to kind of look at both of those just to kind of show the nuance, the difference with use case there. But before we do that, we're going to just kind of take an overall view of some of the signs that are covered in this section. Again, I mean, most of these have use within, just, motor vehicle use cases. Um, and, and they also have application with certain bike facilities. So there's definitely a lot of overlap here. So, if you're looking to use some of these signs, for a bike facility, you want to be referring back to this section rather than up in part two. I mean, there may be some cross-referencing, but your first place to be looking would be here in Chapter 9C. With Section 9C05, so this is the accept bicycles plaque. We looked at the regulatory version of this just a few moments ago. This one, this goes with just a warning sign situation. So the example that they have in the manual is just say you have a no outlet scenario for a bike facility or for motor vehicles, sorry. But there is, bicycles are able to proceed through, so this might be a use case where you'd have the warning sign, no outlet, and then a warning plaque, except bicycles. So just, make sure, and this goes pretty much across the board when you're using plaques, the color of the plaque. So like in this case, black on yellow needs to match the sign that it is going with. So transitioning into Chapter 9D, so this gets into some of the guide and service signs. So we're going to take a look at a handful of sections here. None of these sections are in Ohio Supplement, but some good information just to take a quick look at. 9D01, this gets into your bike destination and distance signs. And, so a lot of these signs, I mean, these and the sign codes associated, I mean, some of these are used for your motor vehicle traffic as well. There is the addition, you have the option with the use of the bike symbol here, but by and large, these signs, are very similar to the motor vehicle designs. They're, if they're just specifically for use for a bike facility, the sizing would be a bit smaller than your motor vehicle use. So I just kind of wanted to call attention to that. The other thing here, and it's at the bottom of this standard language. These signs, if there are situations where this information is applicable to both motor vehicle traffic and bicycle traffic, you are not to be using the smaller sized vehicular or the smaller sized bike signs. You need to be using the vehicular destination signs and appropriately sized for the motor vehicle traffic. So just a note there. So bike route guide signs. So these, again, can be used to help to delineate the different bikes within your communities, bike routes within your communities, and to give, some destination information. So I just kind of wanted to pull this information. So this is the section, the text that goes with this section, and then just a couple of the signs that are mentioned with the section. This particular section, so this is a change with the new manual here on the left-hand side of the slide. So this sign, this is the current sign in the new version of the manual. This was out there previously via interim approval as an alternate sign, But with the release of this new manual, the, this has become the standard version of the M19 sign. The previous version was this black on white. So now, switched over. The symbols slightly different. It's got the US legend here, and it's green and white versus black and white. So just want to call attention to that. If you happen to have any of those out in the field, again, that'd be something to be looking to upgrade when the service life of the older sign is um, reaching the end of its service life. Uh, this section gets into your two-stage bike turn box, the guide signs associated. Again, just as a refresher, this two-stage bicycle turn boxes were part of interim approval 20 with that was released under the previous manual. Now all of this information's been pulled into the MUTCD, so no longer interim approval item. And this graphic here just kind of illustrates the use of those signs for a two-stage bicycle turn box. So you can kind of see here the option, the optional use of this sign. All of these signs in this particular section are their optional use case. But again, just to call out, and it mentioned, it shows them here again. If you do have these two-stage turn boxes, you need to make sure you're addressing the motor vehicle, the potential motor vehicle turning issues with a turn on red. Getting into chapter 9E, which gets into markings. So we're going to talk about several of these sections. The very first section, 9E01, that one is in our Ohio supplement. All the others here, I just want to pull up and talk a little bit about, just to point out a few things. So again, 9E01 is in our Ohio supplement, and again, the reason pretty straightforward. This is another section that talks about bicycle use, locations on freeway or expressway. Since Ohio does not allow a bicycle on freeway, we just struck that language out. So that's the Ohio supplement change information. One other thing that's pretty important to be aware of that's covered in this section is a change between the new manual and the old manual. In the old manual here on the bottom, there were two options for bicycle symbols as far as pavement markings go. The new manual got rid of the one option, so now it's just standardized on this singular option without the rider. It's just the bicycle symbol. So that's again, something to be aware of. If you are freshening up pavement markings on a particular bike route and it has the bike symbols, make sure you're using the new the only available bike symbol now with the new manual. So this one, it's not in the Ohio supplement, but it's an important concept and an important thing to be aware of, and it's something that we get some questions on from time to time. But this one talks about bicycle lanes at intersection approaches, and then these first couple of paragraphs in this section, pretty important. I highlighted them, and I'm just going to read paragraph 1 here. Basically, it says, except as provided in paragraph 2 of this section, a through bicycle lane shall not be positioned to the right of a right turn only lane or to the left of a left turn only lane. So, like I say, we do occasionally get some questions where, they're asking if that's, if there are some cases where that could be an option. This is a case where the OMUTCD is pretty clear. In this case, the national MUTCD is pretty clear on the requirements there. And then the paragraph 2, so that, you know, this refers to paragraph 2. So the only situation is where you've got a through bicycle lane and it may be positioned to the right of a right turn only lane or the left of a left turn only lane, provided that the bike lane is controlled by a traffic signal that displays the bike signal indication. So has to be controlled by a independent bike signal. And we're going to talk a little bit more about the bike signals here in just a bit as well. So so an important concept just to be aware of if you're laying out new bike lane facilities in your community. So here, this section 9E03, this just talks about extensions of bike lanes going through intersections and some of the, you know, the requirements and or optional uh, uh, things that can be done with regard to pavement markings. You know, and then it shows in this figure here, it's just a portion of one of the figures in this section. You know, with the big thing being just, you know, there is this information provided just in cases where you want to make sure that it's clear to the bicyclists, you know, as they progress through the intersection. You know, in some cases, maybe a bike lane might transition or something like that. You do have options to be able to provide some pavement markings to help guide those bicyclists. Bike lanes at circular intersections. So this section, you know, so obviously, you know, we're building more and more roundabouts out, you know, all across the state. This section addresses um, bicycle lanes and circulatory roadways, and particularly paragraph 1 here just talks about bike lanes, you know, shall not be provided in the circulatory roadway of an unsignalized circular intersection. That includes conflicts at entry or exit points, except as provided in paragraph 4 of this section. And then, you know, you go down to paragraph 4 and it talks about, you know, the case where that could occur is when you've got a separated bicycle lane. Those may be used in a circular intersection. So this is important to be aware of with how you treat bike facilities as they are approaching roundabouts or circular intersections. Uh, this section 9E06, so this just talks about the pavement markings associated with your buffer separated bike lanes or bike facilities. And, you know, I just pulled this in here and just highlighted a little bit of the information towards the bottom of the slide here. Probably hard to read on your end, but you know, what I highlighted here, the MUTCD, you know, this is an example where the MUTCD actually gives some pretty, you know, some pretty black and white guidance on, you know, spacing for the pavement markings, how the markings are to be oriented, you know, depending on the width of the buffer, whether or not pavement markings are required. So, and then the figure here on the right hand side just kind of illustrates some of this, the text within this section, just for some of the different scenarios you might face if you've got a buffer separated facility and how to appropriately provide pavement markings there, just to kind of help delineate that buffer. This section, counterflow bicycle lane. So this just has some information in it as far as um, pavement markings associated with a facility where you've got, say, one-way motor vehicle traffic, but you've got bicycle traffic that potentially could be going counterflow to that motor vehicle traffic. There are some particular intricacies that you definitely need to be taken into consideration in these type of cases. I mean, this is not it is used around. I can think of a few cases, at least in Central Ohio, that I'm aware of where this is out there in the field. But I just kind of want to call attention to the manual does have some information that helps those that would be considering this type of um, layout for a bike facility and how to appropriately mark it. And then there's also some signage considerations as well. So this gets into the pavement markings associated with the two-stage bike turn boxes. So we've already looked at a few slides that get into some of the signage. This section gets into the specifics of how to actually mark these two-stage bike turn boxes. A couple things to be aware of, and some things that I've noticed just where some of these are out, existing in the field. But some requirements with these is that there has to be at least one bicycle symbol marking within that two-stage turn box. The other thing, and this is something that I see missing in some locations, but these two-stage bike turn boxes need to be bounded on all sides by a solid white line, just to kind of help offset, to delineate that the appropriate space where the bicyclists are supposed to be sitting. And then the green colored pavement needs to cover the whole entire two-stage bicycle turn box. So that's just a couple of the things here. I mean, definitely this is a section, if you've got these in your community, you should check out just to make sure that you've got everything covered appropriately with these. And we're going to transition into a little quiz here. And for those of you that set in on the first session, this is going to be a replay for you. So you already have the answers to this, but this time around, like previously, I had set it up so we could do a little interactive quiz. I'm not gonna do that since I presume some of you were part of the session one, but I do want to talk about it. I think it's important, and it's still, I think, something that is a lot of bicyclists aren't even aware of exactly how they're supposed to use the two-stage turn boxes. So I think it's important, just kind of educational thing and messaging things, so that we can try to get that message out to all the potential users, and try to make sure they're understanding the intent behind these two-stage turn boxes. But what we're looking at here, so this is actually in downtown Columbus. This is the intersection of Spring Street and Grant. And so what we've got, the horizontal route here is actually a one-way. Spring Street's one-way headed westbound. There's a bike lane on the right-hand side here. And then you've got Grant, which is a two-way street. And you've got your two-stage turn box here at this location. So the question is, how do you legally go about making a left turn while you're headed westbound on Spring Street if you're wanting to go southbound on Grant Avenue on a bicycle? So first option here, option A, this would be if you're westbound bicyclist, you're approaching that intersection, you stop, you have a green, and you approach that intersection, you go to the two-stage turn box, you stop, you rotate your bicycle, and then you wait for that southbound signal to turn green, and then you proceed on Grant Avenue. So that's option A. Option B is the westbound bicyclist has green approaching the intersection. They stop in the turn box, they rotate their bicycle heading south, and then while Spring still has that green, they see a gap and they just go ahead and go southbound onto Grant. Option C here, you're heading westbound, the bicyclist is heading westbound. As they approach the intersection, they start to they merge out into the motor vehicle lane and then start to move over into the left lane and then make their left turn from the left lane of Spring Street. While it's the Spring Street signal is still in the green. And then option D is that both A and C are potential legal options. So the answer to this is definitely A is a legal option. B definitely is not a legal option. C, again, is a legal option. It's not one that we would recommend, but it is one that we see happening from time to time, especially when there's lower motor vehicle volumes and a bicyclist wanting to, not wanting a delay necessarily. We do see that happening from time to time. So your correct answer there, both A and C are legal options. Again, we would definitely recommend, most of our bike users using option A here, especially during the higher volume motor vehicle times. And again, just to stress this, I mean, it still seems like there's some misunderstanding on the appropriate use of these two-stage turn boxes. So the more we can do as practitioners to educate the users and try to get information out to them on the appropriate uses. And the idea behind these is to give bicyclists a place to safely sit, while the signals are changing, gives them a place to sit, be visible, to make that movement without having to cross over multiple lanes of traffic to make that turn. So moving on, this section 9E02, so this gets into just your, I guess, traditional bicycle boxes. I copied in here a couple graphics from figure 9E02. This is a couple different pages just showing some different options. If you've got a single lane motor vehicle lane, or if you got multi-lane, as to how you can lay these out. But again, the idea here is that bicycle box provides that bicyclist the opportunity to get up at the beginning, ahead of the motor vehicle traffic, so they're visible, so that when that signal changes, the bicyclists would be the first to go, and they would be more visible to the motor vehicles. These, I think, people, there doesn't seem to be as much confusion with these, but again, just it's important to make sure that these are being used appropriately, and so this gives some of the guidance associated with that, and then and requirements. Again, you've got to work, think about your turning motor vehicle users, and if those need to be prohibited to avoid conflicts. Moving on into chapter 9F. So this gets into signals associated with bike facilities. We are going to take a look at 9F02. Nothing in the Ohio supplement necessarily, but this is an important new addition to the manual. So 9F02. So again, the top part of this slide here, I mean, this particular section is a super small section. It's just these 2 paragraphs. It's basically just referencing you to some information, on the use of these bicycle signal faces. These are new in this particular manual. They used to be covered under an interim approval, but now they're part of the new OMUTCD. But really the important component here, and I want to kind of stress this, is I pulled over an excerpt from part 4 of the manual, which gets, takes a deeper dive into the use of these bicycle signal faces. And the thing to remember here is here in paragraph 2, or I'm sorry, paragraph 9, the bottom here, that if you're using these bicycle signal faces, they shall only be used to control bicycle movements or bicyclists moving on a green bicycle or yellow bicycle. Signal indication are not in conflict with any simultaneous motor vehicle movements at the signalized location. And that includes right or left turns on red. So if you take a step back and you think about that you've got to be very careful. The use case for these bicycle signal faces, you got to be careful with, you cannot, based on the current MUTCD language, have any conflicting motor vehicle movements that are simultaneous with the bicycle signal faces. So, there are uh, some documents out there that show some scenarios where you might have a green bicycle signal while you also could have a concurrent green with a motor vehicle. Those would not meet the new MUTCD requirements. So just kind of want to call attention to that, and just as if you're considering use of these bicycle signal faces, um, make sure you're reviewing this information that's in part 4 that takes a much deeper dive on the use of those. And with that, we'll kind of wrap things up here. Again, I wanted to list off several resources for folks to refer back to, just some quick links, if you happen to be going through these slides, to get you to the Ohio supplement page, to the national MUTCD page, to the standard highway signs information, which that's where all of the federal standard sign design information is located. Our Ohio SDMM page, so that's where you would find info on our Ohio specific signs. Plus, we do, a lot of the commonly used federal signs, we do also list those in our Ohio SDMM, just using the federal information. And then also just a link to our old or previous OMUTCD document. And with that, we'll kind of wrap things up. Listed off my contact info, and then also Jonathan Young, who's our traffic controls group section head. So if there are any additional questions, feel free to throw those in the chat box, and we'll try to get them addressed. And Victoria, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you. And actually, there's 2 questions. I know one to Jonathan and one to Jen to respond to, but my thought was if there was anything that either of them would like to add from the questions that they've been answering, because I know that we're scheduled out the 2 hours, and if there's any good information that they would like to put in there, it would help to complete out the 2 hours, so I don't have to shorten up the time on the certificates. Let's see, one question that did come in, I haven't assigned it to anybody yet, so maybe Kevin, you want to take this one. It says, any new guidance on bike boulevard pavement markings and signs?
That's probably one that we would need to take a little closer look at, but I mean, we'd be happy to take a little deeper dive and get back with you, with whomever answered that, or whoever asked that.
I'm sure they'll appreciate that.
And if you could, yeah, just shoot us, make sure that you shoot us that question in our chat as well.
Yep. Actually, I'll be giving you guys all the questions that have come in, even those that have been answered, so you'll have them.
Awesome.
So Would Jen or Jonathan like to jump in and add anything in about the questions that they've been answering?
I can just add, I guess, a little bit here. So I know we got a lot of questions on the changes for the school zone sign assembly, and kind of just want to make sure, reiterate Kevin's points, and just clarify a lot of those changes. We're trying to kind of again minimize, I guess, our Ohio specific signs if a federal sign could apply, while also trying to uh, uh, align best with the ORC on when school zones are active, and they're quite complex situations. And we felt the use of when children are present, um, or the when flashing or listing out specific times a day, uh, was a relative option to uh, best define those situations. While there's no real perfect answer, it was kind of the best solution that gives the most information. And
Sounds
Victoria,
good. There's a question
you
that
have
came in. I
another?
don't know. I do. It says, have you seen any successful examples in Ohio of requests to experiment using flashing yellow arrow signs for motorists while giving a green bicycle signal to expand the possible use cases for those bicycle signal faces? And Jonathan, I'll put that over to you so you can look at it too.
Yep, I do not know. Oh, there, and I do not know of any submission, both in Ohio or nationally, that has been submitted to FHWA to experiment this. So, uh, with that said, I say there's no successful examples because, as part of the experimentation process, there's a research component, and that would have to get published to kind of explain the benefits or what was found through the experimentation. But
Thank
always
you.
open to learning or hearing about kind of trying to solve this conflict between bike signals and traffic signals.
Sounds good. And then there was a question that kind of came in two parts, and I sent that over to Jen while you were talking. I don't know if she wants to address that one now or if it's one you want to just follow up with the person who asked it later.
Yeah, I think I'm going to have to follow up with them later. I'm not sure I understand what they're asking.
Okay. I don't see any other questions that have come in right now. So I want to thank you guys. You have done a tremendous job. It started months ago, actually years ago, when we first found out that the update was coming out. And, you have done a fantastic job providing tremendous information. And I have to tell you, from my colleagues across the country, Ohio was like right there and on it, getting this information out. So I know there have been a number of other LTAP centers, even across the nation, that have wanted the information you guys have put together. So thank you so much for taking care of everybody out there that needs to use this information. And we'll look forward to doing your replays
Okay.
where all you'll end up with is questions instead of having to actually present.
Hey, and Victoria, on that note, if you we got a little bit of time, I think I saw something where those have been scheduled now. Do you have those
Yeah,
handy to be able to share with folks that
actually,
might have
I'm
missed
glad you
one of
said that.
the
Yeah,
previous?
in the comment box, there's like a chat box that I have access to send everybody information. I put links to the first two. I scheduled replays through the end of June at this point, and then the other three replays are going to be scheduled in July and into August. So, at least the first two are out there. We'll be sending information about all the replays out on our LTAP listserv. I actually had to wait for this one to conclude and get the recording in order to schedule the final one, because that's the way that the system works. But we will definitely send information out on the LTAP listserv. So if you know of folks who need this training or you missed one of those, just make sure you're on subscribe to our listserv, and you'll get the information when we send it out. But those first 2 sessions, I've put it in the chat, and the links came out in our LTAP newsletter yesterday as well, the e-newsletter that we send out now.
Great.
But thank you,
Okay.
Kevin, for mentioning
Thank you.
that.
Yep.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. We appreciate your time and attention, and we will look forward to hopefully hosting you on a future LTAP webinar. If you got a couple seconds when this ends, there should be a survey that's going to pop up. And in that survey, we do have one open-ended question that says, what else can we provide training for you on? If you have a second, please let us know what else you'd like to see training on. Thank you. Everybody take care.